Well, hi, it's Dargie here with another teachable moment. Today we're going to look at just how I might run through processing a landscape image in Lightroom. I just want to give you an overall feel for how I go about this. I think everybody has their own process really, and this is the way I do it. Not the only way to do it, maybe not the best way to do it, but this is how I go about it. Before we get into it, let me invite you to subscribe to the channel. If you want to get more of my videos, you can click the subscribe button. Also check out my website grahamdargie.com, where you can find out more about what I do, including my upcoming new Lightroom Essentials class, which is running in the Aberdeen area here in Scotland. So that's grahamdargie.com. Anyway, let's dive into this. Here's a picture I took in Elgol on the Isle of Skye, and this is how I might typically process it. So we'll go all the way back to the start and we'll go through how I've done this. So down here on the bottom right, reset. Now, as I said, this is my way of going about things, and I've been using Lightroom since 2011, I think, so about 8 years when I'm recording this video. And so I know how to make Lightroom do what I need it to do. I don't know everything or every single feature or every keyboard shortcut, but I've been using it for some time, and I can get it to do what I need it to do. So this is us going through this shot from Elgol and Skye. So first of all, I don't know what I was thinking here. Do you ever shoot a picture and then you get back to the computer and you wonder why you shot it that way? So I just don't know why I've shot this upright, probably trying to get the foreground in at the bottom, but I don't like this shot, and I want to change the crop first of all to a landscape kind of orientation. Actually, before I do this, the first thing I usually do on a Lightroom processing is this lens correction. So it's on the right hand side, just go down a bit, remove chromatic aberration, enable profile corrections. Any lens that you use has got an inherent kind of distortion. Some lenses will have chromatic aberration. Just tick both of those boxes, take that away straight away. And anything you do in Lightroom on these panels on the side, you can toggle them on and off so you can see the sort of before and after of what you've done. So you can see that the shape of the image particularly popping in and out. You won't see the chromatic aberration unless you go all the way in, and I'm not going to get into that just now. So I'll scroll back up to the top here. Let me crop this picture. First of all, you can see the horizon is squint here. But anyway, let's sort out the orientation here. If I pull this corner of the overlay that's come down, that just kind of shrinks down the crop in the same proportions as it was shot in, because this padlock is locked for the aspect ratio. What I want to do is change this to a landscape ratio. So I'm holding this, I'm clicking and holding this, but I'm going to pull this to the right, and that sort of pops the orientation over to the landscape orientation. I want to just line up this upper third with the horizon, and I'm just going to try and straighten that out. That looks okay. And so typically you might put the horizon on the third there, but I'm losing some stuff down here, and obviously I'm losing a lot down there at the bottom, but I want to still have this rock in here. So I'm going to change the aspect ratio from as it was shot to 4:5 or 8:10 ratio. That gives me a slightly squarer rectangle, slightly taller image, but still in the landscape orientation. I just want to get this rock in the bottom really. Let's try that, see how that looks. We might just fiddle with that as we go. We'll see how we get on. Okay, so that's that. Let's get into really processing it. It's one thing I find difficult when I'm talking to people about Lightroom. It would be good to be really prescriptive about the process, but I think it's hard to say always do this, never do that, because every picture needs its own treatment really, and so you have to treat the picture with that kind of respect and say, okay, what does this picture need? So at the beginning of this process, I'm going to take a minute to look at the picture and say, okay, what does the picture need? First off, sky needs to come in a bit, so we can do something about that. Overall, it's lacking a bit of contrast. We've got some nice light coming across here, but it's not really popping as such, so we can deal with that with the contrast and the color saturation. Maybe the color profile and the white balance might come into play as well. And I want to be careful to maintain a nice level of detail in this kind of white wispy kind of water. I've got a 1 second exposure here, so as the waves lap over these rocks you get this kind of ghosting in the water. So first of all, let me look at the profile here. So it's just coming in the Adobe Color profile. Let me change it to landscape. You can see that pops the image really well if I just go back to color. And I've been finding that the Adobe landscape profile works really well for landscapes, funnily enough. You would expect that, really. And the vivid, it's okay, it might just be too much. So the landscape one is fine for me. I do want to look at the white balance. Sometimes pictures come in looking a bit cold, and I don't mind that really in the scene. I will change the white balance in the camera when I'm shooting it, but just knowing that you can do it in Lightroom takes the pressure off of that, and it's one thing you don't always have to think about. But typically I might look for a cloudy white balance, and that's actually cooled the image off, which isn't what we want. So let me go back to as it was shot. We've got 7650 on the color temperature. Let's try shade. That's going to be about 7500, so I'm just going to manually potter with that. I just want it a fraction warmer than it was as shot. Go back to the custom one that I dialed in, so that's okay for me for now. Often I'm going to take the highlights in. I want to make sure I get lots of detail in the kind of highlights area of the picture. That's the sort of brighter tones that are not quite white. And whenever I bring the highlights down like that, I might, just to preserve the brightness of the picture, scooch the whites up a little bit. Again, I do want to be careful with that white water, but bringing the highlights in gives us some detail in the kind of middle tones of the image, and scooching the whites up just brings back the overall brightness of the picture, or the bright feeling of the picture, because the lightest tones get sort of pumped up. Let's see. You might see a lot of the time people talking about setting a black point, setting a white point. For me, I think it's important that the picture has a black point. It's flat without it for me, so I'm going to just bring the blacks down a bit. You can see up here on the histogram I've got this black point triangle clicked, activated. That means when I pull the blacks down, any pixels in the picture that go to black will show up with this blue overlay. So obviously I don't want it to be there, but I do want it to have some black, so I'll just keep my eye on that area down there. So some blue overlay popping up there, so that tells me that that's okay. Yeah, some images you're going to want to set a white point. I don't want to do that for this image really. If anything, I want to maybe bring these whites back a bit. I just want to maintain that detail in those lighter tones. If you have white pixels in the image, when you go to print that image, if you print it, that nothing prints in this area. It's just the white photo paper that will show, and it's not good. So you need to preserve the detail in the highlights. I'm just going to push those whites back down to where I want them. I don't know, it was around here somewhere. I don't need, like I say, I don't need the histogram to touch the right hand side here in the lighter tones for this image. So that's okay. That's looking okay. From there, let's just go down this panel. Texture is the new thing in Lightroom at the moment, and I don't know if this image needs much of that. I wouldn't want to do that as a global adjustment, because although I might want to add texture here, I don't really want to add it up over here. So I'm going to leave the texture just now, and the clarity. Clarity is sort of contrasts in the midtones. I don't like to do dehaze. I don't think I need to do that on this. Vibrance and saturation. Well, saturation pumps up the overall color saturation all over the image. Vibrance pumps up the kind of the mid-tony saturation, or some people say areas which are not already saturated. So that's a more subtle way of just giving it a bit of a color boost there. So that's okay for me. You want to be subtle with these things. And those are the global adjustments that I'm going to do just now. I'm not going to get into the tone curve at the moment. Let's now look at some local adjustments. The first thing I usually do with a landscape is look at the sky. And so I'm just going to get the grad filter here. I'll set this to something, minus 1.99, minus 2 stops, just so that when I pull that over, I know kind of where it's landing. That's not going to be the final adjustment, but it's just going to show me where it's going. Another way to do that would be to press O on your keyboard, and that brings up this red overlay. And so that tells you kind of where the adjustment is going to fall. I'm going to click O again to get rid of that overlay. Now the filter is active here, and this panel is controlling what we do on that filtered area. Okay, so that's not what we're going to do. I'm just going to bring the exposure down a bit. I think when the sky is a bit light like that, the image sort of floats away at the top. I don't know, I like to put a kind of a dark edge at the top just to contain the image. That's a phrase that I came up with, containing it. That's just what I say. I'll bring the highlights in as well again for subtle detail in that area. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll add a second grad on the top, just on the top edge of the picture, maybe there. Oops, I'll try and get it straight, just to further sort of contain the top of the picture. So I'll just use the exposure on there. So I know you can do this in camera, in the scene. I'm not a big fan, honestly. My camera is a Nikon D810. If you shoot at the right time of day, I mean in good light, early light or late light, I'm not losing the sky very often. I don't really shoot into the sun that much, and I can't really justify the cost of getting grad filters because they're way expensive, the top quality ones, and for something that I know I can do in Lightroom afterwards for free, or for what I'm already paying for. So if the sky can't be contained in the one image, and the 810 has a tremendous latitude to capture detail in the highlights, but if it's not going to work, I'll just shoot another image for the sky, and I'll merge those together in Lightroom. See another video of mine about that. So for me, if you ever go to Skye, you're going to see lots of landscape photographers. If you see one guy without a square filter on the front of the camera, it's probably me. Anyway, let's just toggle those grad filters on and off now. And for me, that kind of adds a bit of mood to the picture. Certainly it's more reminiscent of how it was at the time when I was there, and again just sort of contains the top of the picture and keeps everything stuck together in the picture. So that's okay for me for now. I'm going to close that. The next thing I'm really seeing now is I'm just a little concerned about these highlights in here. I want to have some detail in there, so if I print this image, it's going to have some lovely detail in these highlights areas. I don't want to do a global adjustment for that. I just want to do a local adjustment that hits only this area. So I'm going to use the adjustment brush here. That just looks like a brush. Now the panel has popped up, and this these are the adjustments that will apply to the area that I select with the brush. So I'm just going to try and choose the lightest areas. I'm painting that on. Let me press O here so that the red overlay pops up, and I'll just find the kind of brightest areas. And I'm just changing the size of the brush by rolling my finger on my mouse. I've got a Mac. You can do it with the square bracket keys to increase and decrease the size. You can also go down to here, but it's a bit clunky to do it there. I prefer to use the square brackets, or just to roll my finger on the mouse to do it. Maybe over here as well on this tiny bit. So I'm just doing this quickly for the video. If I was doing this for myself, I would take a little more time to make this selection, but you get me. Okay, so this is the area that I've selected. Maybe I'll just get that bit as well. Now I'm going to press O so that overlay goes away, but the selection is now live. I don't want to take exposure down. That would be too blunt. Let me just do it with the highlights. So if I pull the highlights all the way down, it's only affecting those highlighty kind of tones. You can see how subtle that is. Maybe a bit on the whites. Yeah, just to bring it in a little bit. So that's okay. Let me toggle this on and off. It's a really subtle difference, but I want to make sure that they print. So that's okay for me. Done. Okay, so that's a lot of what I'm going to do on this picture. Often, I don't know about you, but a lot of the time when I'm shooting landscapes, I'm going to find some dust spots or whatever up on particularly you see them up at the top really. There might be one, and I'm going to take this away with the spot removal tool. Where is it gone? So I'm just going to spot on that. This tool used to be not so good in Lightroom, but it's been much better in the last couple of years. Here's another one. So if it's a picture you're going to print or show quite big on your website, it's definitely worth going through this at 100% or 1:1 size really closely on your picture to make sure that you get any little nasties that are in there. And there even might be some things that are not nasty. Let's see what we can find down here that we could clone. So there's these little buoys on the water. I think buoys, floats, whatever. So there's a lobster net or something down there. That's not bothering me, but if it was bothering me, spot removal tool, and you can just click that away. And if that doesn't land where you like it, let me press H here to hide that overlay. H brings it back. That's okay, but if it didn't land in a place that I liked, you could move it down to somewhere else. That makes it much worse, so we'll just put it back to where it came from. That's fine for now. And again, you can toggle that adjustment on and off, and it's okay. It's not great, but it's okay for what I'm trying to show you. Okay, let's look at final touches that I might do here. Sometimes, I don't know if vignettes are really cool at the moment, but they certainly used to be, and sometimes it's a nice way just to, again, to use the same phrase again, just to contain the image, just to make sure everything is kind of stuck together. So when I bring that vignette in, I'm not a big fan of heavy vignettes. Let me get rid of that. I just want it to be really subtle. Just a feathering on the edge of the image. So that's the amount, so that's how dark the vignette is. The midpoint is how close to the middle the vignette sort of creeps into the image, and the feather is how hard the edge of the vignette is. Of course, roundness, you can make it squarer or more round. So let me click these back to where they were. I just want this to be a little bit subtle in here, not in any way like that. Take the feather closer to the 100 end and just pull that in a fraction. Just like most things in Lightroom, you don't want to overdo it, just be quite subtle. So if you toggle that on and off, if in doubt, just take it back a few points. But it's doing something, but I don't think it's too distracting. Okay, before I finish, I might quickly just re-look again at some of these sliders. Vibrance, I'm wondering about the whites, because I took that edge off of that white water. I don't know, I think that's okay. I think we're good. So, before you finish, you can press Y. I like to do this, and that shows you a before and after of the picture. That's the keyboard shortcut, is the Y key. And that shows you before and after. There are different layouts that you can choose for that down there. Another way to do that is to use the / key. So that is found above the Shift key on the right hand side of your keyboard, next to the Enter or Return key. And that's a before and after. So you can see what we've done there really quickly. You know, how long would you spend on an image? It depends on the image and how important it is to you and what it needs. But for me, if it's an important image, I could spend, you know, half an hour easily. If it's not such an important image, it might just be in and out, auto settings. You never know, something might work. But if it's just a really unimportant image, you don't need to spend much time on it. But for something that's a bit of a one-off, like a trip somewhere, it's probably worth spending a bit more time. So we'll call that done. Thanks again. I hope this gives you some insight into how you might go about processing your landscape pictures in Lightroom. Don't forget to subscribe. Check out the website, grahamdargie.com. You can see what I'm up to. You can get a free ebook called 3 Steps to Better Photographs there if you sign up for my newsletter. Enjoy your photography. I will see you again. Take care.